In this presentation, we will take a closer look at the life and work of R. H. Ives Gammell, a painter poised to make a lasting impact on the history of art. The life of Ives Gammell unfolds like a journey of artistic discovery, rooted in privilege but driven by an intense personal calling. Born into a wealthy banking family in Providence, Rhode Island, Gammell's path might have seemed predetermined toward conventional success. However, his desire to become a painter, a vocation far removed from the secure world of finance, was sparked during his formative years. After graduating from the prestigious Groton School in 1911, Gammell enrolled in the Museum School of the Boston Museum of Fine Arts, a step that would define his life. In his autobiography, Gammell opens with the words, "In search of a teacher," framing his journey as one of apprenticeship and mentorship in the world of art. His fascination with the Parisian masters, fueled by the publications from the Masters in Art series, illuminated the world of classical painting and the high standards of the craft he sought to attain. Though his talent was evident, Gammell faced a familial obstacle in his father's reluctance to fully support his ambitions. Harvard awaited Gammell, but his passion for painting took precedence. His father, swayed by the advice of artist Joseph DeCamp, a renowned portrait artist of the time, granted the youthful Gammell a one-year trial to study under a professional artist. DeCamp's approval or disapproval would determine whether Gammell could continue on this path. This window of opportunity marked a critical turning point in Gammell's life. It's notable that, for the wealthy, such pursuits were not as impractical as they might have been for those of more modest means. Gammell observed that families with fewer resources often discouraged their children from chasing artistic dreams, aware of the hardships and uncertainty involved in making a living from art. Yet in circles of privilege, these challenges, though acknowledged, did not close off the possibility for those passionate enough to pursue it. Gammell's story is one of privilege meeting persistence, a man granted the means to explore his passion, but needing to prove its worth even within that world. His search for artistic refinement, beginning in his youth, would eventually lead him to the highest levels of classical painting. The very first artist that Gammell would meet and paint his mother's portrait was James J. Shannon, American-born but largely centred in London, and upon seeing the artist at work in a prepared room at the house was a delight to him, and provided real insight into the inner workings of the painter's craft. Following the brief one-year study guided by DeCamp, Gammell formally began following his career path and sought out a more regular instructing program. His first serious instructor and advisor became William Sargent Kendall, who also painted portraits of his parents that young Gammell viewed often in the home, but hadn't yet met him. His first initial meeting with the painter made a lasting impression. Gammell sought him out at his studio after his mother's suggestion, and here it should be noted that Gammell did have some cast drawing work under William Loring, but the level of instruction was cursory and over a summer vacation, while Kendall's tutelage would last nearly 4 years. After this period, Kendall broke off the association with Gammell, which led him to ultimately work with William Paxton, who was to remain a close mentoring relationship until Paxton's passing in 1941. During that period, Gammell would make the trip abroad to Paris and Academie Julian just prior to World War I, only to be forced to return at the outbreak of war in 1914 and resume study in Boston. But the Parisian capital would be the eye-opener that would stay with him forever. It was the world he sought, and art was everywhere to be found. The great ateliers were still operating, and the giants of painting still working in their studios. Carolus Duran's studio was located just around the corner from where Gammell was studying at Julian's Academy. He would work with different instructors while there, including Paul Royer. But at the suggestion of some fellow students, Gammell was led to study with their choice, and missed the opportunity to study with Jean-Paul Laurent at his atelier, where his sons were instructors at the time while elder father worked on commissions. It was a choice he regretted, because Pierre Laurent, the younger son, was an accomplished painter, who was socially well connected, which appealed to Gammell, and whose art and intellect the youthful Gammell admired. Years later, Gammell made mention that he had wished to have had that opportunity to work with the painter but never did. These are choices that are made at times when a true calling for an opportunity happens, that is delayed or missed. Pierre Laurent is just such an interesting part of the story for Gammell. Returning home to Boston and still very eager to continue his studies, Gammell would find a true mentor in William Paxton. This would be a lifelong relationship that proved to be advantageous to both artists. Paxton was gaining notice and growing into a prominent painter of portraits, and was particularly interested in interior settings for his painting genre. Paxton was also of a slightly later generation, from the 10 group of associated artists, well known in Boston circles, which included Joseph DeCamp. But Paxton proved to be the best option for Gammell's interests, and timely. Although Gammell was very much infatuated with the academic values of the French system, his association with Paxton provided a real interest in Impressionism, as sought by the 10 group of artists and prevailing in America generally. There was also a deeper interest in the Dutch masters within the Boston painters, in particular the work of Vermeer. Many of the works by the painters were a blend of factors that were introduced into many of the artworks. With interior pictures, the idea of impressionist broken colour becomes more prominent. Yet the painters were also very devoted to accurate drawing at all times, so the mix proved very interesting when exhibitions were mounted by these painters. Paxton and the others were admirers of Jean-Léon Gérôme's work for the veracity of design and careful execution of planning and skill in the picture-making process, which was equally of interest to Gammell, as he would be devoted to imaginative artworks as time went on. In the decade between 1920 to 1930, Gammell worked tirelessly on his vocation to reach his fullest potential as a painter. His focus on excellence was to ultimately cause a nervous breakdown. While his work was steadily improving under the careful eye of Paxton, Gammell felt his drawing skills needed much more improvement. Coupled with the fact that his spiritual well-being caused him to look further into himself, he remembered the favourite poem from his youth called The Hound of Heaven by Francis Thompson. This triggered his delving into the writings of Carl Jung, which further fueled the idea of expressing himself in the imaginative realm of inspired picture-making. However, it was the Hound of Heaven poem that he felt aided his thinking. The poem depicts a man who is pursued by God, and according to Gammell, it enabled him to more fully find the link between myths, symbols, and poetic imagery, and the perpetually recurring emotional patterns of human life from which they evolved. That gave him the inspiration he needed to use as his genre, express his own way, and evolve into pictures. So from the 1930s into the next decade, we find Gammell devoting himself to the production of drawings, sketches, and studies in oil, often simply on prepared paper, hiring models, and religiously being preoccupied with his new venue for artistic freedom. He was also so driven during a certain point in his career that he determined to stop all oil painting and just draw. Something almost unheard of by most artists, to truly endeavour to master skills toward real draftsmanship with a total commitment over some 3 years. Gammell was a thinker. His social circle in Boston, along with his many interests such as opera, theatre, and writing, were the extra activities he was involved with. The idea of actually teaching and taking on a few chosen students at a time was yet to happen. But with the passing of his mentor and friend William Paxton in 1941, that would change. As he expressed it in his writings, he woke up afterward and realized the skills and learning of all that he had acquired were quickly slipping away from the art school scene. The world of art shifted so far afield that it was unrecognizable by the mid-20th century. It was such a wake-up call that he began to write his passion on the plight of art, which became The Twilight of Painting, a book for a rebirth of understanding and of the high calling that real art must attain to. Published in 1946, it would become a Bible for many artists thereafter. Gammell, then, determined to find talented young people truly dedicated to learning the craft of painting and begin to train up a new crop of well-trained painters. Inside the book, his dedication is very clear, and the dedication says it all. To the painter, born or unborn, who shall lift the art of painting from the low estate to which it has fallen, this book is hopefully dedicated. Gammell continued writing on painting and painters. His books include The Life of Dennis Miller Bunker, The Shop Talk of Edgar Degas, The Boston Painters 1900 to 1930, and his own autobiography. Gammell taught at Fenway Studios in Boston. Students were not far from his larger studio room down the hall. His earliest group of students included Robert Hunter, Robert Cormier, Bob Cummings, and Richard Lack, with others to follow over many years, right up to his passing in 1981. His impact by this effort was and is enormous. Classes included the study of anatomy, memory drawing, and the sight-size method. Richard Lack would move to Minneapolis and found his own atelier and coined the term classical realism. Lack recalled that Gammell wanted his students to be immersed in culture, something Lack himself would commend to his pupils. It's been said that it often takes some 20 years to actually change minds. To foster in something new or different takes time. What one generation appreciates the following most likely will find not suitable. The training of painters and reaching for the highest standards, and here we refer to the consummate skills in producing viable pictures, fine design, carefully developed drawing skills, and a good understanding of technique, are all part and parcel of the artist toward a craft to be relevant. Gammell's legacy continues to grow and has reached the world over with new painters practicing the very methods that he taught and becoming ever closer to the masters, which remain our teachers and guides to fine art. The Gammell-Lack Institute is dedicated to the furtherance of their legacies, to help new generations and cause them to compete to be the best and add to our culture the most inspiring works that talent can muster. So with that, we hope you enjoyed this brief review of R.H. Ives Gammell. His life was wholly dedicated to the art of picture-making at its finest. His realization that all would be lost if he did not do something is what we can all cherish, for one individual to make a difference. As always, we hope to shed light on artists who have attained to the lofty position of greatness in painting and sculpture. Thank you to those who helped by way of a donation or super thanks. It's much appreciated, and there is a PayPal below for any amount. So until next time, it's bye for now.